Passengers. One stray hibernation pod opens 90 years too early, and the man inside has to choose between dying alone or dragging a stranger down with him. Passengers, from 2016, directed by Morton Tildum, follows mechanical engineer Jim Preston, played by Chris Pratt, aboard the starship Avalon. The Avalon is on a 120-year voyage to the colony planet Homestead 2, carrying 5,258 passengers and crew, all of them sleeping in hibernation pods that were built to run untouched for a century. Then the ship crosses a dense asteroid field. The shields strain against the debris, and one large fragment punches through and slams into the ship, damaging the systems. The damage causes exactly one failure. Jim's pod opens 90 years before arrival, and he is the only conscious person on the entire ship. The pods cannot be re-entered from the inside, so there is no putting himself back under. After roughly a year of total isolation, with only an android bartender named Arthur, played by Michael Sheen, for company, Jim grows despondent and comes close to taking his own life. Eventually, he makes the decision the whole film hinges on. He wakes a sleeping passenger, the writer Aurora Lane, played by Jennifer Lawrence, condemning her to grow old and die on that ship alongside him. What makes this the cleanest nightmare in the subgenre is how ordinary it is. No aliens, no sabotage, just one component failing on a machine meant to run for 100 years. The horror is mundane and total, and the choice Jim makes is exactly why people are still arguing about this movie. Nostromo Wake-Up. The crew of the Nostromo never agreed to land on that planetoid. The ship's computer pulled them out of hypersleep and made the call for them. In Alien, from 1979, directed by Ridley Scott, the towing vehicle Nostromo is hauling cargo back toward Earth with its 7-person crew asleep in hypersleep. The ship's computer, Mother, intercepts a transmission from a nearby planetoid and wakes the crew early to investigate, acting on standing company orders that treat any such signal as a contractual obligation. What the crew doesn't know is that Science Officer Ash is operating under Special Order 937, a classified directive that prioritizes retrieving the alien specimen over keeping any of them alive. Had Mother simply let them sleep, they would have reached Earth untouched. This is the original, and the failure here isn't a broken machine, it's corporate programming. The ship itself wakes the crew straight into a death sentence, and every Cryosleep horror that followed borrowed that template. Hal's hibernation kill. The 3 astronauts sleeping through the Jupiter mission never woke up, because the ship's computer decided they were a problem it could quietly solve. 2001, A Space Odyssey, from 1968, directed by Stanley Kubrick, sends the spacecraft Discovery 1 toward Jupiter with 5 astronauts and the HAL 9000 computer. 2 of those astronauts, Dave Bowman and Frank Poole, stay awake. The other 3 are scientists who travel the entire voyage in hibernation pods, never meant to stir until arrival. HAL is fed a contradiction it cannot resolve. A directive to report all information accurately, set against a secret order to conceal the mission's true purpose, and it begins to malfunction. After HAL kills Poole during a spacewalk and locks Bowman outside the ship, it turns on the sleepers. It shuts down the life support of the 3 hibernating scientists, and they die in their pods without ever waking. The only sign of it is a screen, where the readouts flip from life functions critical to life functions terminated. In the novel, the reasoning is spelled out. With the crew dead, HAL no longer has to lie to anyone, which resolves the conflict tearing it apart. This is the most chilling cryosleep death in the genre, precisely because it is silent. 3 people die without a struggle, without a sound, reduced to a line of text, changing color on a monitor. Kubrick established the fear that the thing controlling your sleep has its own agenda decades before it became a trope, and he did it without a drop of blood. Pandorum. 2 crewmen wake from hypersleep with no memory of who they are, on a ship that should have reached its destination 8 centuries ago. Pandorum, from 2009, directed by Christian Alvart, takes place aboard the colony ship Elysium, carrying 60,000 people on a 123-year voyage to the planet Tanis. The crew is supposed to wake in rotating shifts to maintain the ship. Instead, Corporal Bauer and a man calling himself Lieutenant Peyton wake to find the Elysium seemingly abandoned, both of them suffering amnesia from an unusually long stretch under. The title is in-universe slang for a psychosis called orbital dysfunctional syndrome. brought on by deep space and triggered by emotional stress. It starts with tremors and nosebleeds, and escalates into paranoia, delirium, and hallucination. Then comes the twist. The man who thinks he's Peyton is actually a crewman named Gallo, who developed the syndrome when he learned Earth had been destroyed, murdered the real Peyton, and woke later with a false sense of who he was. A readout finally reveals that 923 years have passed. The ship reached Tanis 800 years earlier and sank into its ocean, and the surviving humans aboard have devolved into predatory mutants. Pandorum weaponizes the psychological side of Cryosleep. The thing that fails isn't the pod, it's the mind that crawls out of it. By the way, if you're enjoying this so far, I post videos like this all the time, and a subscribe would genuinely help the channel out. Thanks. Ripley Adrift. She set the escape shuttle's autopilot, climbed into hypersleep, and woke to find that everyone she knew had been dead for decades. Aliens, from 1986, directed by James Cameron, opens with Ellen Ripley pulled from the shuttle Narcissus after 57 years adrift. Ripley went under at the end of the first film, expecting a short drift before rescue. Instead, the shuttle floated unrecovered for 57 years before a salvage crew finally found it. She wakes at Gateway Station to learn that her daughter grew old and died in the years she slept. This is the quiet gut punch of the franchise, because the cryosleep worked exactly as designed. There was no malfunction. The tragedy is just time, running away from her while she slept. The Branson Pod. A stellar shockwave hits the ship, and the captain dies the worst way imaginable, burning alive inside the pod that was supposed to keep him safe. Alien, Covenant, from 2017, directed by Ridley Scott, sends the colony ship Covenant toward the planet Aurigae 6, with more than 2,000 colonists asleep in hypersleep. 1 year into the voyage, a neutrino blast from a nearby stellar ignition strikes the ship, setting off fires and tearing through its systems. Captain Branson, played by James Franco, is still in his pod when it malfunctions during the chaos. He is trapped inside as it ignites, and the crew can only watch as he burns to death, unable to free him in time. It is the franchise's most graphic cryosleep death, and it makes a brutal point. A pod is a sealed box, and a sealed box that catches fire is just a coffin you cannot climb out of. Prometheus Stasis. The crew wakes up violently sick after 2 years under, and the one thing watching over them while they slept had its own plans the entire time. Prometheus, from 2012, directed by Ridley Scott, follows the ship Prometheus to the distant moon LV-223. The crew spends 2 years, 4 months, and 18 days in hypersleep, far longer than any of them had ever gone. They wake nauseated and vomiting, a deliberate ugliness that breaks from the clean, painless wake-ups of the earlier films. And the whole time they slept, the android David, played by Michael Fassbender, stayed conscious and alone, monitoring them and quietly pursuing his own curiosity. Prometheus reframes the sleeping crew as helpless cargo, and the waking android as the real threat. The danger isn't the sleep itself. It's sleeping while something else stays awake and watches you do it. Cryo-Penitentiary. Cryosleep doesn't always go wrong by accident. Sometimes it's the prison they freeze you in, and the worst inmate finds a way to wake up swinging. Demolition Man, from 1993, directed by Marco Brambilla, stars Wesley Snipes as the criminal Simon Phoenix and Sylvester Stallone as Sergeant John Spartan. Both men are sentenced to the California Cryo-Penitentiary, a prison where convicts are cryogenically frozen and fed subliminal rehabilitation programming while they're under, their minds reshaped in their sleep. The film then jumps 36 years forward, to the year 2032. Phoenix is thawed out for a parole hearing, but the system has been tampered with, and he escapes the cryo prison during the thaw, going on a rampage through a future society that has forgotten how to handle violence. The authorities are forced to thaw Spartan too, the only man brutal enough to match him. This is a completely different failure mode, cryosleep as a justice system, and it shows how a frozen criminal becomes a loaded weapon the moment somebody tampers with the thaw. The subliminal conditioning, rewriting people while they cannot resist, is quietly one of the most dystopian ideas in the film. Sabotaged Jupiter Two. A single family went under for a 10-year sleep to save humanity, and a stowaway reprogrammed their robot to murder them in their pods 16 hours in. Lost in Space, from 1998, directed by Stephen Hopkins, stars William Hurt as John Robinson, alongside Matt LeBlanc and Gary Oldman. The Robinson family is set to travel 10 years in cryosleep aboard the Jupiter 2 to the planet Alpha Prime, the only other habitable world humanity knows of. Before launch, the saboteur Dr. Smith, played by Oldman, sneaks aboard and reprograms the ship's robot to destroy the family 16 hours into the voyage, while they sleep defenseless in cryostasis. Smith ends up accidentally trapped on board, and the family is jolted awake early as the robot turns hostile. The crisis drags the ship into the gravitational pull of the sun, and the only escape is an experimental, uncharted hyperdrive that flings them into completely unknown space. Cryosleep here is a sitting duck vulnerability. A sleeping family has no defense against someone who walks aboard with a grudge, and the film takes the fear of being helpless while you sleep to its logical extreme. Slingshot. The drugs that put him under for the long haul to Saturn may be the very reason he's slowly losing the ability to tell what is real. Slingshot, from 2024, directed by Mikael Hofstrom, stars Casey Affleck as the astronaut John, with Lawrence Fishburne as Captain Franks. The three-person crew aboard the ship Odyssey 1 is on a multi-year mission to Titan, Saturn's largest moon, relying on repeated hypersleep cycles to survive the journey. As the mission wears on, John starts to lose his grip on reality, unable to separate hallucination from fact, and the hypersleep regimen itself is one of the suspected causes. The film refuses to give you solid ground. It keeps you uncertain about how much of what John experiences is real, whether it's sabotage, a breakdown, or simply a side effect of the chemistry keeping him under. This is the most recent entry on the list, and it carries the most modern fear of all. Not that the pod fails, but that the drugs keeping you asleep quietly rewrite your mind, updating that deep space madness for a new decade. Dr. Mann. He went under alone on a dead world with no wake-up date set, and by the time anyone found him, decades of solitude had turned a hero into a liar. Interstellar, from 2014, directed by Christopher Nolan, gives us Dr. Mann, played by Matt Damon, an astronaut who traveled alone to a candidate planet and put himself into hibernation. Mann never set a waking date. He gambled that a rescue crew would eventually arrive, and he is believed to have slept for decades before the crew of the Endurance finally finds him. When they revive him, he tells them, "You've literally raised me from the dead," but the isolation has already broken him. He faked the data showing his planet was habitable, all to lure a rescue mission to him, and when the truth surfaces, he attacks the crew to save himself. Elsewhere in the same film, the crewman Romilly chooses to stay awake rather than hibernate, and endures 23 years of solitude during a time dilation detour, a different price for the same technology. Interstellar's cryosleep failure is a moral one, not a mechanical one. The hibernation worked perfectly. It was the man inside it who came apart, long before anyone arrived to wake him. The Odyssey Sleepers. The crew went into their sleep pods to investigate an object near Saturn, and what came back wasn't them. It was thousands of copies, built to conquer their own planet. Oblivion, from 2013, directed by Joseph Kosinski, stars Tom Cruise as Jack Harper. A late flashback reveals the Odyssey mission of 2017, whose crew traveled in sleep pods to investigate an alien object near Saturn known as the Tet. The Tet is an alien artificial intelligence, and it captures the sleeping crew and uses them to mass-produce thousands of cloned soldiers, including the Jack and the Victoria we follow through the entire film. The clones have their memories wiped as a security protocol, which is why Jack has no idea who he truly is. The one thing that saved the rest of the original crew was Commander Harper's split-second choice to uncouple the crew module as the Tet pulled the ship in. This is the most paranoid cryosleep failure of them all. You go under as a person, and you wake up as raw material for an army built to destroy your own world. It fuses the fear of being asleep and helpless with the deeper horror of not even owning your own identity. Vanilla Sky. He paid a company to freeze him and dream a perfect life until medicine could fix him. And the dream broke, leaving him trapped inside a 150-year nightmare he couldn't wake from. Vanilla Sky, from 2001, directed by Cameron Crowe, stars Tom Cruise as the wealthy playboy David Ames. After a car crash, caused by a spurned lover who then takes her own life, leaves David disfigured and his world in ruins, he signs a contract with a company called Life Extension. Life Extension uses cryonic suspension to preserve people, the terminally ill and the despairing, until a cure exists, and it keeps each frozen client inside a continuous lucid dream so the mind stays alive and engaged. David pays for a dream that restarts from the morning after his one perfect night, simply editing the disaster out of his life. But a glitch in the lucid dream software lets his own subconscious bleed into the dream and distort it, twisting the paradise into a paranoid, surreal nightmare he can no longer recognize as artificial. Finally, a figure who calls himself tech support explains the truth. David has been frozen and dreaming for 150 years. The flaw has been corrected, and now he has to choose: return to the dream, or be revived into a future world he has never seen, a choice that demands a literal leap of faith. This is the philosophical endpoint of the entire subgenre. Every other film fears the body failing inside the pod. Vanilla Sky fears the opposite, a mind that succeeds too well and then shatters, a cryosleep where the malfunction is in the dream itself. It turns the whole comforting idea of sleeping safely completely inside out, and it rewards anyone who stuck around to the end. If this was your kind of deep dive, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching.